From working class beginnings in Glasgow grew one of the world's most successful football coaches. He's the Rangers supporter who went on to play for his boyhood idols, but later turned down the chance to sit in the Ibrox hot seat. Sir Alex Ferguson is a man who celebrates his Clydeside roots. He's one of Govan's most famous sons. 1940s Govan was a world centre for shipbuilding. It was here that a young Alex Ferguson first honed his footballing skills. His father worked in the local shipyards, a Celtic supporter and strict disciplinarian. But with Alex brought up and schooled in the shadow of Ibrox Stadium, there was only ever one team he would end up following.
Well, I was only about 200 yards for the stadium, and we went to until I started playing Saturday afternoon football. I was always going to the games as a kid. My dad was a Celtic fan, and I think it's been well documented, and he used to take us to Celtic games when we were kids before we went to school. But when we went to Brooming Road Primary School, my brother and I, Martin, we started, supporting Rangers, and we never missed games at all. But I always remember it was a great thing about these days. There's a family lived right above us, the Dockerys. They're massive Rangers fans, and it was a big family. There was about six brothers and 4 sisters, and my mother would maybe get me into something before we went to the game and give us a sandwich wrapped up and things like that, and you'd hear them all come out the door together. I remember some of them were married, so their husbands or wives were all Rangers fans, so they used to meet there to go to the game. And you knew when they started to go down the stairs, it was 2 o'clock, and making their way to the game. So that was your cue, so we better get cracking, But at that time, when I first started watching Rangers, of course, the great players like Waddle and Thornton, Bill Woodburn, and these were my sort of heroes as young kids, when I was as a young kid. And growing up with that era, it was the title, the Iron Curtain, the defence, that great aura about them, invincibility, never losing goals. And I can't remember what my first game would be. It would be around about 1947 or 48, 40 maybe. And I think it was a midweek game against Queen of South, but it's only a vague memory.
Can you remember being lifted in over the turnstiles at Ibrox?
Yeah. We used to go to the Rangers end and stand right at the front. We wanted to do that in these days. Nobody bothered really. I think there may have been some sort of a purge at 1 or 2 occasions to stop it, but nothing serious, and you get over, But me and a pal of mine used to, sometimes when we got a wee bit older and we got to about 12, we used to get the sack for the beer bottles, But at Rangers at that time, they used to, in the enclosure and in the main stand, you didn't have a deposit on your Bovril cups. They used to have Bovril in the cups, white enamel cups. And the trick, if you could do it, was to get these enamel cups at the enclosure, fill your sack, and get over the terracing at the corner at the Rangers end, wait till the bobbies had passed, jump in and go into the other side and get your tanner deposits. Because in the terracing under the shed on the far side, which is now the Brooming Road stand, you had to have a 6-pence deposit in the cups there. So that was your spending money if you could go off it. But it was great. Rangers at that time, of course, they were successful. The great teams. But then it changed in the 50s. The great team started to break up, and there was a period of that there wasn't the same kind of Rangers team.
Attendances at Ibrox at the time were around 40,000, 50,000. Were you in awe of the place at the time?
Well, they used to fluctuate the support. If there were a couple of bad results, they would go down to about 35, 40,000. But in the big games, particularly when Hearts, Celtic games, of course, you get big crowds. Hibs teams of the 50s, the early 50s, with Riley and Turnbull and Smith and those, they were great teams. And I remember being in practice. I remember the great cup tie epic against Motherwell, and it was the first game in a bit of a battle. And I think there was about 60,000 in that game, but the crowds were big and healthy then.
Your brother was a Rangers fan like yourself. How did your dad, as a Celtic supporter, take that?
Well, he was all right. He didn't bother, because he went to his games at Celtic and we went to our games. We went to hide our scarves in behind the toilet. You know, that was the only penalty really. And we were saying ourselves, if it catches us, because they never allowed scarves, even in the Celtic supporters club. They never allowed scarves in the bus. You know, I'm disappointed about that. You know, but we used to hide us behind the toilet cubicle. You know, and Martin got caught. Martin got caught with once. Martin was always getting caught, and he got a thrashing. You know, but my dad threatened more than he ever did. You know, but. No, he never really bothered. When I signed for Rangers, I said to my ma, I says, "What was my dad thinking? What was he saying?" Because he was quite a man, my dad. He said, "He's really proud." I said, "Oh." So he never went to see Celtic again when it started following me at Rangers.
How did it feel when you finally signed for your boyhood idols?
Well, it was a sort of a long, drawn-out process, because the previous season had been rumbling always in the papers, you know. And I was hoping it was going to happen, and I went on tour with Scotland, the Far East tour to Israel, Hong Kong, right around the world. It was a 6-week thing. It was agony, actually. And when I come back, all the press were waiting at the airport, and there was all apparently been all over the papers that Rangers made a bid for me, and I couldn't. There's nothing I could tell them. You know, I just come off a point from Canada. The last stop was Canada for that tour. But in the corner, little Jim Roger, who was a famous journalist, a fantastic man, he's standing going like that to my wife Kathy. She was there to me. So Kathy goes over and says, "What is it, Jim?" She says, "Tell I'll be up to see him tonight." He knew everything. And the Saturday after that, I was in the house up in some Silver staying, and I was watching television, and a car drove up. Kathy was away out shopping. A little mini car drove up, and this young man came out, and I looked through the window and said, "That is." So I go out the door, and it was Scott Simon's son. He says, "My dad will have a word with you." So I went out of the car. He says, "Do you think you can come to my house tonight?" I says, "Oh, definitely." Got his address and went that night, and they agreed the deal, you know. So it was fantastic.
Looking back to how you were then, how would you describe yourself as a player when you signed for Rangers?
Well, I mean, most people say I was an aggressive player, but I think I had a decent football brain. I think I had a good football brain. But I was aggressive. That was the style of play. I was committed. I was always a committed player. And I had a goal scoring record.
To Johnston. Ferguson's a goal. Goal by Ferguson.
When you think back to the sort of player you were, would you get a game at Manchester United? Are you the sort of player you would like to sign as a manager?
Well, my record I don't fail when I would say yes, because I could score goals. But I mean, ability-wise, with the players I've got today, you can't compare. You know, I mean, it's an old hat stuff. That could the players my era play in today's era, and the great players could have. You know, the Johnsons and the Murdochs and the Hendersons would play in this era without question. They say the same thing about Charlton, Best and Law. Of course they would have played, because they were great players. They're playing in any era. And it's just always a bit of a myth, that. But, you know, I was a competitive player, and I was good in the air. I had a good goal scoring record. I don't know my final record at Rangers. I think I scored about 30 odd goals, I think, in my 2 seasons, something like that. So it wasn't too bad. Unfortunately, going to Rangers at that time, you couldn't have gone to Rangers at a worse time, because Celtic were a dominant team. They were a fantastic team, Celtic. Not just that were they a fantastic team, they had a fantastic manager. I think the manager really was the deciding factor between. Ability-wise, there wasn't a great deal between Rangers and Celtic at that time, ability-wise. But the manager had something about him. He had that touch, you know. And he had some, well, To me, the Celtic team at that time, two world-class players, Johnson and Murdoch, two fantastic players. But the rest seem to all know what they're doing. You know, there was a well-organised team, very competitive team, and Rangers had a lot of individual players who we never, in my period anyway, never seemed to gel as a team the way that Celtic did. And I think that was down to the manager. And it's not a criticism by David White or anything like that. David White was a decent man. I think David was just too young to take on Rangers at that time. And because Rangers were arguably the biggest club in Britain at that time. You know, and it's a mammoth job to take on a club like that without great experience. David had been managed at Clyde for a couple of years. But it's not an experience you need to go and manage a club the size of Rangers. You know, and that has proven itself time and time again.
Scott Simon left soon after you joined the club. How much did that hurt at the time?
Well, I think the way it was done was wrong. If my memory serves me right, that there was an old accountant, McBain, who broke the news to him. Now, I think everyone associated with Rangers at the time was shocked at that. I mean, he didn't deserve that. He served him 17 years, I think it was. He'd won a lot of trophies. He was a decent man, a good man. Scott's failing was he wasn't a press man, you see. He was a Rangers man. They used to say, well, he wasn't a tracksuit manager. Yeah, but he ran Rangers Football Club with one secretary. I think her name was Isabel. He ran the whole club. He was in there at 8 in the morning, leaving at 8 at night. He was Rangers. So it was unfair, that kind of criticism we got, because he wasn't a media man, you know. But he was a strong manager, great. I thoroughly enjoyed playing under him. Unfortunately, it was a short period. But I think that in modern way of behaving or conducting your business, Rangers wouldn't have done that, you know. I think at the time, Mr. Lawrence at that time was an old man, you know, and he probably didn't have the proper advice around about him, you know.
Did you consider leaving when Scott left?
Yeah, but I was sick. I couldn't believe it. It was Bobby Seath that said to me, he said, you behave yourself, you're here to play football, just forget the politics. I thought it was terrible what they did to him. And I was only there a few months. I was that type of person, I suppose. I grew up with in a socialist background, and I felt sick about it, you know. I felt it was unfair. But Bobby Seath was right. I wanted to play for Rangers all my life, and I had the chance, and once Bobby spoke to me, because Bobby was the first team coach at the time, he was dead right. It was none of my business at the end of the day. I was there to play football.
Davy White took over. How was your relationship with him?
It was all right. I mean, there's a lot gone into it, you know, over the years about my treatment and all the rest of it. But he was a decent man, David. He wasn't a bad person like that. I didn't agree with him in his team selections, and I suppose I get the same problem here. I don't know many players that is going to agree with the manager when they're not picked. And I was somewhat the same. I thought that it was unfair, you know, at the time, and I still think it was unfair. You know, I think I gave him everything. He knew that every time I went on that pitch from, he'd get more than 100%. He'd get everything. And the fans were great with me. The fans were terrific to me. There was never any stage in my time at Rangers where the fans never behind me. They always supported me, and always appreciated that.